Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Ben from Universal Audio. Welcome back to Office Hours. It's been a special week of Office Hours here on UA Live. It has been Moog Week, so we've had some incredible sessions this week. We had Tycho, we've had Shay Pope, we had Ariel Rexshade, Houston Singletary. Oh man, I'm gonna space on one of it because it's been such a hectic week, but. Man, it's been a lot of fun. I've had so much fun geeking out with everybody about the Minimoog. I've learned so much about the Minimoog personally as well this week by kind of seeing how everybody uses it in slightly different ways. And I hope you guys have enjoyed that as well. But we figured what a great way to cap off the end of Moog Week by bringing on probably one of the most interesting Moog artists that we could think to bring on. We've got joining us today from the band Fartbarf. We've got Josh. What's up, man?
Hey, how are you?
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Uh, I know, right? Well, so for anyone that's not familiar with Fartbarf, somehow, if they didn't see, I hope you guys saw this title coming up on our live stream and went and checked out some of your guys' music. But for anyone who somehow accidentally missed out on checking you guys out ahead of the show, how would you describe Fartbarf to a new listener?
How would I describe it?
Uh-huh.
Oh no, we always hate that question. Um, uh, well, we weed out a lot of people very quickly. I guess I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah.
If you don't have a sense of humor, you probably won't like us, and we
Right.
don't have much left to make fun of. So,
Well, that's great. Well, but you guys are so like your background though in music. You kind of come from more. Do you come from more of a rock or electronic music background?
all of us come from more of like a rock background. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we're up from Southern California here, and uh, there's three of us, and all three of us, you know, our entire youth from I want to say 11 or 12 years old up, we've been playing in metal bands and punk bands and stuff like that.
Uh-huh. So this is like the synthesized punk funk craziness, right?
Yeah, I mean, we play. I don't know, like in the early days of Fartbarf, we kind of had this vision, and it was not as high concept as Devo, but clearly we used them as a massive role model for us. Kind of like the primitive meets the future, if you could consider analog synths futuristic.
Uh-huh.
When monkeys are playing them, I guess they are.
Well, yeah, when you go back to caveman, caveman just banging on synths. It's a good mixture of classic and future all at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So we kinda took our own approach at it. None of us are really trained pianists or anything. We're more just riffers. So
Mm-hmm. So how is coming up with riffs on synths? Like what, do you kind of approach it in that guitar? Like, let me come up with a cool thing to go over, or like, do you start with a sound? Like, where did inspiration for songs come from?
kind of. It started as like early days of Fartbarf before we had Brian as our drummer. It was just Dan and I that kind of. I mean, this is a long, long time ago, a decade or so, and I would just be in my parents' spare bedroom there, driving them insane with this collection of synthesizers that I kind of acquired from recycler buys
Mm-hmm.
over my whole youth. Um, and it kind of got to the point where we were like, let's just spend what I think it was like $400 a month to get our own 24-hour lockout space in
Mm-hmm.
Wood or Lawndale or wherever it was, and we got the space, and we could only annoy ourselves, so that worked out great for us.
It's the key right there, is to be able to know yourselves and not your neighbors or your partners, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't even start out to be a band. We just started out with exploring sounds and having fun shaping sounds of things that were different than a guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's kind of like Dan and I's background is coming from guitar and bass playing, where you can get some cool sounds. I mean, depending on how big your pedal board is, if you want to be like the Edge from U2. But
Yeah.
I had a couple synthesizers at that point in time. I think I had a Moog Voyager, Korg MS-10, couple Roland or a one Roland SH-101, which is like the first synth I ever bought,
Mm-hmm.
and a Korg VC10, which was Fartbarf's first vocoder, and we kind of started our sound from that. Dan quickly, after just jamming on a lot of my synths, bought his own Moog Little Fatty,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of away it went. We would just spend so much time in our studio space that at that point it was the lockout with several other bands. People would be banging on the doors and asking like, what the hell kind of instrument is that? I think it's because too, it's like we were playing them as if they were like guitars, like heavy riffing, like Slayer style or Sleep or like Black Sabbath or something.
Uh-huh.
Just because that's kind of our roots and where we came from as kids, you know, playing just cool riffs. And that's kind of what we were hunting to do with these synthesizers from kind of the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
And people, like enough people, surprisingly, came in like, you guys got to like play these things live. And then it was, you know, this is a decade ago when dubstep and like the laptop only stations were taking the world by storm, and we were so anti that because, you know, coming from a punk and metal roots, we hated that.
Yeah. You're trying to do that. You're trying to be like, yeah, screw that shit.
Yeah, I think that was kind of initially why we were so just anti-laptop live, anti-computer anything. We'd rather show our mistakes than have things be perfect if it wasn't us playing.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of had the whole vision way early on, and I don't know, we kind of just played so many shows time and time again that we just gained a little traction, and now we're here, strangely enough.
Right? Look, now you made it. You made it to Universal Audio office hours, man. Congratulations.
Got a Model D right here for crying out loud.
Yeah, so, obviously we're here to geek out about synths and the Minimoog in particular. What is it about the Minimoog, you know, compared to either other brands of synths or even within the Moog lineup? What is it about the Minimoog that attracts you to it?
I mean, before I was ever lucky enough to play one, it was like my idols. One being Mark Mothersbaugh Devo, clearly. You know, he's a master at this thing, and just a lot of bands. Like my dad turned me on to Frank Zappa when I was a young kid. I didn't really get it, but between them, the Talking Heads, it's like all these bands that I kind of grew up listening to. And even if the Moog, like the Mini, wasn't in the forefront, it'd be on the stage somehow, you know?
Yep.
It's always my thing. So, and that was kind of like the holy grail when I was not a kid, but, you know, mid-teens and kind of growing up through high school, junior college and all that. That would be like the one to get. Unfortunately, they were insanely expensive and probably broken, so I never got one. Then whatever that was, 2001 or 2002, when the Voyager came out, I ended up purchasing one of those, and in my head at that point in time, I thought, this is the Minimoog. This is what I've always wanted.
It's Minimoog with presets, right? That's what you're thinking.
It was different, but I had some fun with it, with the XY pad and everything. But it took me all of 10 seconds when they announced that they were redoing these things and having a reissue to put it up on Craigslist for sale. Because lucky enough, I sold it. Demi Lovato owns it now.
What? No way.
What she's doing with it, but she owns it, and I got the D, so really happy with it.
It worked out great for everybody.
Yeah. No, it's perfect.
And so, what is there something about the sound of the Minimoog, or is it the functionality? Like, what is it that kind of separates it for you from, you know, something like a Voyager or an MS-20 or something, you know, seemingly similar?
Yeah, I mean, we've got an MS-20 that we kind of use sometimes for leads live. Like we'll break it out and play it. But I mean, it was like hands down. Like the second I got the Model D after selling the Voyager, it was like, well, they look the same, but they don't sound anywhere near the same. I I'm really pleasantly surprised, and it's one of those synths that kind of when you get your hands on one, you never want to let it go. And with Fartbarf being very performance driven, I mean, we were playing shows for, I want to say, what was it, 6 years as a band before we put an album out.
Oh wow, that feels really rare these days to like.
We were just having fun, kind of. Again, like we never set out to really be a band, and when we did it, I mean, I was kind of working in the music industry back then, and I was disgruntled with how the industry was treating artists, and if you did make it, you're kind of a slave to the label. So we kind of set out with just a big middle finger to the whole thing, and that's why we named ourselves such a ridiculous name, and gave ourselves these faces that you can't even hardly look at. It's kind of like
it's all on purpose. It's not by accident. This is all very intentional.
It was very intentional to keep us grounded and probably never get signed to a record label, even if we were begging for it. So
yeah,
that's kind of what our intentions were. And, we really weren't out to like write an album and record an album. We played probably, I don't know, couple 100 shows, 300 shows or so before we even started recording an album. And out of all the synths that kind of we went through, if we look through all the early pictures of all of our performances and stuff, the D is it's the way it's laid out and the simplicity when you really kind of get down to the nitty gritty of it. It's like the perfect performance synth for what we do.
Yeah. That's because the expressiveness of it, or the controls, or what is it that kind of makes it the perfect fit?
I think it's a combination of the controls, just being big, huge knobs with a lot of space. And again, like our situation is pretty peculiar because we can't really see anything when we're on stage anyway. So to kind of like practice in our studio with our eyes closed and being able to play this thing almost as if it's Braille. It's different than, say, a lot of different other synths that we have. I remember we were playing once at this club. It was like the hottest day in history in Los Angeles, and we played this little club called The Smell in downtown LA. And I was using an SH-101 as the lead synth, and we were so hot that sweat was dripping out of our masks like a waterfall. And our fingers were all waterlogged, so nothing was working. And I don't know if you ever played an SH-101, but the knobs that click, they have no grit or tooth to them. They're just very slippery. Well, I couldn't do anything. I was just, the sliders would work, but none of the octave knobs or anything. My hands were just basically just like as if you put WD-40 on everything.
Oh my gosh.
These have nice little like gnarled edges.
Yep.
Switches, pretty bulletproof.
And that's what you need if you're up on stage rocking with it every night, right?
Yeah. So I think it was kind of like a process of elimination of a lot of synths that we love when we're just sitting at home, like in our bedroom recording. They just don't kind of cut the mustard for what our specific needs are when we play live.
Yeah. Nice. Well, we'll speak.
Talking about the sound, obviously, we already know what the sound of these things could do.
Well, exactly, and you segued it perfectly there. Like, so, would you mind just kind of showing us a little bit of like what your process is and how you approach, come up with a sound and a musical idea using the Minimoog?
Yeah. So, I mean, normally there's a couple. Actually, strangely, there's like a couple versions of Fartbarf. One being our live, very like. We're going out attacking this as like songs and very song driven and kind of like boom, boom, boom. We're banging these songs out that we spend a lot of time writing, and the whole process is different than when we just go into the studio and sort of just start like laying ideas down and jamming. And this takes us back to like the very early days of Fartbarf when Dan and I would just sit there and play the same riff for 7 hours, and our wrist felt like we've got carpal tunnel. Like, okay, let's go home now and get some Del Taco on the way. But yeah. So our process, that's kind of like what I was going to show you. Like we always start with And again, we're like very hardware driven band, so it's kind of fun to be able to mess with what you guys have invented here. Just because it is, I feel like a fish out of water kind of working with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm pleasantly surprised. But the way we normally approach it is I've got an MPC over here. When we first started, we had an MPC 2000, and then I upgraded to the 2500 with the flash drive, and then more recently I've kind of slimmed down and got the MPC Live, which has been great for us because it takes a little discs. So
yeah,
if things go wrong, I could always just go to a music store and anywhere in the country and buy a new one and just put my little backup drive in, and we're good to play another show.
Yeah, that's the sort of reliability you need for a live show.
Yeah, exactly. And since we're not Radiohead or anyone fancy, that's another reason why we kind of avoided just using a single laptop playing live, just the paranoia of one little glitch.
Yep.
Not to make us stand there not only looking dumb, but looking dumb with these masks on. So, so we normally start out just with the MPC, and when we play live, those, from kind of like our writing standpoint, we usually, the drums will be a lot more in depth, and then we kind of break them down when Brian comes in and does his thing and makes things sound a million times better because we have like an actual live drum kit.
Yeah.
Works in cahoots with all these synthesizers. But pretty much at like the rawest form as far as our songwriting, we start with just this very simple beat on the MPC and kind of just start layering riffs from there.
Mm-hmm.
So I just made a quick one real quick, It's like a simple. And strangely enough, we like to work with hip hop drum kits.
Obviously.
Maybe we just like the grittiness and it's nice drum kit sounds.
Yeah.
And normally when we jam, we like really dark sounding chord progressions. Our live songs are very upbeat, but the typical BPM for a jam is like 98. And I was messing around with the Arpeggiator on your guys' version of it. I was kind of loving. Arpeggiator, I really love having like a really tight decay and then a long release. It just sounds super blippy. Like we have a lot of fun with our the Moog Matriarchs that just came out, kind of doing the same thing, playing with the arpeggiators, where it's really like a very tight decay on like the amp, and then the filter envelopes have like a really long like.
That was rad. Well, I don't know if you noticed here, Josh, but we've been Zoom bombed.
Oh, all right.
Oh wait, Patrick muted. You gotta turn it there. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Patrick Aurelio, the product manager at UA for the Minimoog Luna instrument. I figured he'd be a fun little drop-in guest, and he's who turned me on to Fartbarf as well. So I was like, I got to bring all these worlds together for a fun Friday afternoon. How you doing, Patrick?
I'm doing great. Well, I'm doing great other than the internet went out at my house, so I had to drive down to a parking lot in order to say hi. So obviously I'm in my car.
Nice. Perfect way to Friday afternoon place to hang out, right? And just in your car in a parking lot.
Absolutely. I do it all the time.
That's awesome. Well, so yeah, Patrick, man, I know the amount of time and effort that went into recreating, the Minimoog as a Luna instrument. This wasn't just like a thrown together, bits and pieces and put it out sort of thing. How long did we spend making this plugin?
For the lead engineer and myself, it was 2 years. 2 years each, not 2 years combined. I spent 2 years of my life on this stuff.
Wow. Yeah, it shows.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, so Josh was just kind of showing us the jamming process, and man, that was so cool hearing like the analog, the real thing combined with the arpeggiator on a software one. What's been your, I know you've just had a short time, using the Luna instrument version of it, but what's been your feeling or your reaction to it so far, sonically and musically?
I mean, the sound is pretty damn close, like I was talking to you a little bit yesterday, just about when I dial like your perfect preset in here and kind of like translate it to this one of mine. It's a little bit different, but with a couple like tweaks of the knobs here and there. I mean, this could go with two Minimoog in real life side by side. They're not going to be identical anyways. But get them sounding pretty close. Yeah, I was pretty surprised actually.
Yeah. Well, and Patrick, I know that's kind of what your gig is, right? Is not only to match it, but then to also make, you have to pick a unit, and you kind of have to pick a target, right, for when you're designing something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were 3 generations of Minimoogs. And when we picked our golden unit, it was actually the second generation. The third really has the most stable oscillators, and the first, people say it has a lot of character. They're very rare. The first generation, there are only 300 of them. Mm-hmm. They're massively expensive, but they don't stay in tune. So we chose the second generation as the golden unit. We also had 2 employees that brought their modes in. So we had 3 reference units. Mm-hmm. And with 3 reference units, I can tell you that, yes, from one to another, there's a ton of variation in timbre, especially as they age. But One nice thing about this is the modern reissue is much closer to the last version of it, and this is the middle version of it. So even if you have a Moog, this is like even if you have a Minimoog, this is like having another Minimoog, like a complete unit.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, well,
I'm having so much fun with the Arpeggiator on this thing, just because clearly I don't have one built into that. But those two patches that I was just playing, granted this one had like a really tight decay on it. They were the same patch. Like I started out with like one patch I kind of made them almost identical, but as you could hear, like when you run it through that Arpeggiator, it's just so much fun.
Cool. Yeah. I was also the product manager for the Arpeggiator, and I really worked hard to make sure that it had the right blend of being simple to use and having lots of super creative features in it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, you know, man, and some of those shapes, like alt high and alt low, like those, what are those actually doing? Like, what is it? Kind of, it's like a stair step of a pattern, or how's it work?
Okay, let me see now. Alt high. I actually can't see it from here, and it's so I know with the up down, there's an up down where it. Oh man, I wish I could zoom in here.
So yeah, up down's kind of just goes straight up and down, up, hold down. It goes up to the top, stays there, and then go back down, right?
Right, and that's important because that's the way you have to do it to fit into a measure.
Yep. So then,
then you've got the other ones where you get kind of an Alberti bass effect where it starts in the middle and fans towards the outside of your chord. And
yeah.
Sorry, I just had to switch to power here.
Yep, all good. Yeah, so the amount of shape, but also having that gate time control, right? Like that ends up, to me, that's been the thing I tweaked the most inside the Arpeggiator, is like being able to open and close, the edge of the note it's so important.
Absolutely, and the way you can play with the kind of the dynamic aspect of it, where you can adjust the gate, but then you can also as Fartbarf was saying, you can adjust the release, and you get this very I don't know, human and machine quality at the same time when you can adjust the gate and the release and get different timbres out of it.
Yeah, I really love working with that. Then you throw it in a random mode, and it sounds like you're a genius keyboard player. So I really like using that random mode.
Yeah, me too.
I'm gonna try.
It makes for such cool. Yeah, you just get random melodies, but so like everything is perfectly in time, perfectly in tune, and it sounds like you're just a mastermind of music.
Yeah, exactly. It's awesome.
That's really cool. So I've had a question. I think I pinned it into to make sure I asked you guys this, especially you, Patrick. So on the Minimoog, the switches underneath filter modulation. So there's the filter modulation switch, which says send the modulation to the filter, but then the two below that, those are both keyboard control. What exactly are those two switches doing in the Minimoog?
So if you have both of the switches engaged, then the filter is going to be following the keyboard fully. And then the two different, which of course they're not really labeled as such, but if you only have one, I believe it's the top one, you get 1/3 of the volts per octave, and then the one that I believe is the bottom one, I believe you get 2/3. And so it's without having a continuous control, it's actually still very versatile in how the filter really can react to your keyboard playing.
Nice. And so, Josh, is that something? Are you using that as part of your patches usually, or is that, do you kind of
filter modulation on the keyboard control?
Yeah,
normally when we play live shows, I kind of just have the first third set on, and one switch to off, and I couldn't really tell you exactly why. I think we got a lot of oscillators on the stage at one point in time.
Yeah.
Playing just really chainsaw like sounds, and for whatever reason, it's not too abrasive with them both being switched on. It kind of just fits pretty well when it's just like that single first third that's on.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if I've got a question coming in here from the live chat, kind of wondering about, one of the things that you mentioned, Patrick, is like the older ones don't stay in tune. Did we model any sort of like untuning or model age or wear and tear on the oscillators into our emulation, or does it actually stay perfectly in tune?
Well, actually, we hooked up the golden unit for, I want to say, about 5 days, and recorded every fluctuation in pitch for about that 5 days, so that we could get a super accurate idea of how temperature, power dips, and everything like that affect the drift, and how much of it just seems to be total chaos.
Mm-hmm.
In theory deterministic, but absolutely completely unpredictable. And so, yeah, we rather than trying to create just some semi-randomization drift control, we have just we dug our heels in deep and made those oscillators drift exactly the way the golden unit drifts.
Wow. Jeez, that 5 days. That's I can only imagine just like is it almost like a polygraph kind of test where you see like the needles kind of move across it?
That's exactly what. Yeah, it outputted as a plot, just like a polygraph test, and the real Moog doesn't lie.
I was like, exactly. Well, man, and so what's really cool, I've kind of seen this a lot this week, is the Moog. You basically treat it like a guitar, and a lot of times people follow up the Moog with like some pedals or some effects. So Josh, is that part of your live setup as well? Like, do you run stuff through pedals as part of the sound, or do you do just the raw synth?
I really love throwing this thing just through like a very simple delay pedal.
Mm-hmm.
Make it sound huge. Doesn't really necessarily be like a chorus pedal, but the delay pedal for kind of my needs is great, because a lot of the times, like, Dan's normally playing his sub 37 is like the bass machine live, and I use this kind of primarily for some bass here and there, but a lot of just leads and kind of like little solo riffs. And
mm-hmm.
I just feel like the delay pedal, and I kind of threw some delay in on both of these in this session, just to kind of like mimic that. But I love throwing like a cool just delay on there. Yeah.
And are you doing is it like a short time, or is it kind of something that echoes out and adds a bunch to it?
Normally I kill like the high frequencies on the delay, just kind of almost like acts as almost like a little bit of a reverb. Just it fills in the space when you stop playing.
Mm-hmm.
But like, for instance, right now, like live, I use it's like this simple. Show you here. This little guy, just a little memory man, or a memory toy, Electro Harmonics. Simple.
Yeah.
Kind of get the job done,
Yep.
Yeah. You've got no choice but lots of roll off on that one.
Yeah.
That's cool. And so, Patrick, any recommendations for people that are kind of trying to emulate that inside the box with the Luna instrument version of it?
Well, I'll tell you, I am in love with the sound of that with the Galaxy tape echo, because that I don't want to say how old I am, but I was around for a lot of those old recordings, and just the sound of anything through that Galaxy tape echo is it just harkens back to the sounds that made me fall in love with the Minimoog in the first place.
Yeah. Nice. That's amazing.
Like unpredictable effect.
Uh-huh. I was gonna say, Josh, I noticed that you loaded up some stuff on the emulation here. So I see like the precision delay mod, some preamp, and even like a stereo. Was that the Ditronics stereo plugin?
What do I got going on here? I've got this little guy, Arpeggio, and then This one right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, I haven't had super like long amount of time to mess with Luna, but I'm having a lot of fun with it, you know?
Yeah, that's been the goal. Is like, the goal is to really make it feel and react just like an analog synth and analog effects would.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of like anything, it's like we've been going through now, like we've been playing as a band for the last decade, and not that you get burnt out with the same kind of things, but the second you get something new, you get like super pumped to use it, and it kind of like inspires you to write new things, and that's kind of like what I've been messing with this Minimoog and like the Arpeggio and the whole, pretty much all these plugins. I've just been like, let's see what this one does. Let's see what this one does. I'll start my free trial now.
Yeah. So when you're kind of approaching creating a sound on the Minimoog, where do you start? Do you kind of break it all down and go just single oscillator and try to start shaping it from there, or like what's your process like for sound designing?
Yeah, normally I start with just oscillator one. Normally just make a simple sound like that. And then for live, I normally have like the second oscillator tuned to like a third, and then kind of like what I was telling you earlier, coming from like the punk metal days, like I like my Minimoog sounding like I'm playing power chords when I'm heavy riffing.
So, surprise, surprise.
I play power chords just with a single note. So that's always fun to be able to detune the oscillator. They're just so much fun. You can get lost in them for weeks,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I normally start with like a single oscillator and get kind of like a really nasty, aggressive sound. I've got like the after pressure controlling the filter on this one, and this is like one of the reissues. I got it pretty early on when they announced that, like I was saying, and what's cool about these reissues is they've got a ton, even though it looks very not limited, but it kind of looks like a vintage Model D. The reissues, they have key commands. So you hit a key command, you power the unit on, and then all of a sudden you could have like that oscillator drift as if the things are getting ready to like explode at any moment. Or a lot of these controls that you entered down here, luckily I could do like the different lowest or last with key commands on here.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have sample and hold though, so I really love how you included that.
Yeah, well, that's maybe one of the modulation sources that I know almost nothing of how it works. What is that sample and hold function doing in the modulation mix, Patrick?
Well, basically, it works from the noise generator to pull a random voltage every time the LFO crosses its 0 point. So It's basically like an LFO triggered little random generator. And the few things that we put in that wasn't a hardware mod that was available at the time, during Minimoog's production run, there were 3 companies that you could send your Moog to and get mods from.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wanted to do, instead of like slathering a bunch of modern features in, is I wanted to make sure that the extra features were as close as possible to the hardware features that people could get at the time.
Yeah. Nice. And so that's kind of where, so like the pitch bend range, you could have that modded, right? That was a pretty simple tweak.
The main thing that people would mod would be having that extra LFO, because everybody wants to use that third oscillator for an oscillator.
Yeah. So how would when they would do a mod to add an LFO, would they just add it to the front panel, or is that just like an internal, like here's a fixed LFO that you can never get back to?
Normally a lot of these mods would be they put it on the front panel and they'd slap a decal on top that looked like the silkscreen.
Nice. Make it look like it's almost from the factory that way.
Yeah, as close as they could. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, and so Josh, the other my favorite knob on the entire Minimoog is that external input, and basically using that as like a feedback circuit. Do you use a lot of feedback in your sounds?
Kind of. I mean, when you really want to get nasty,
Uh-huh.
that thing is very gnarly sounding. I noticed that on, I don't know, again, like these things vary from synth to synth. This on my particular one, that thing gets so. Well, what's weird about mine too, I'm assuming all these is like the master volume control affects this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so depending on how loud I have that, that'll be crazier and crazier. It'll start sounding like things are falling on top of each other at one point in time.
Yeah.
But, you know, sometimes we use it, sometimes we don't. Really kind of just depends on the song, you know, like how abrasive we want to get. Funny story actually is, I think it might have been with the Voyager. It was a while ago. It could have been with this. But anyways, we were playing a show on Marina Del Rey, and we have a song that has like a really long and relentless frequency sweep. And we actually lit speakers on fire on the stage. All
What?
the monitors, as if we were Spinal Tap. And it started. We thought the house engineer turned on a smoke machine, but it had that electrical fire smell.
Holy shit.
You know, it's not good when you smell it. And luckily, it was our last song. And what ended up happening, I guess, is all of the tweeters blew out and ignited. They literally lit themselves on fire, and we loaded all of our gear back up. We're like, all right, don't worry about paying us. We're out of here. So, and it's just funny because again, like coming from like playing in all these metal bands and punk bands, who would have thought that it's like the synthesizer band lights speakers on fire, you know? But all thanks to the Moog filter.
Well, it does point to that fact that analog sound isn't just about warmth; it's about bite in the top end too, and having real clarity in that bite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so in the plugin version, Patrick, did we follow the same sort of gain staging, right? Like your main output volume influences how much the external input overload comes in. Is that right?
We actually decided to bypass the main output gain so that when you're using it in a recording environment, that it's not going to blast you when you're trying to do it. And so you can bring in that effect when you need to, and you don't have to be constantly compensating to make that happen.
Yeah, that was kind of like when I first got it. I was just sitting here, kind of diving deep and seeing like, how do I trick this thing? How do I make it sound like not like mine? And I was like pleasantly surprised when I was like, wait, I don't need to turn the volume down when I've got the overload thing going full blast. It was kind of nice.
when it was like kind of almost a creature comfort, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, well, okay, that's no fair. I want that.
Well, next thing you know, you're gonna be wanting to be able to store actual presets on the real thing, aren't you?
Yep. One day.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to mention about nasty sounds on the Minimoog is that, of course, the feedback is one way to do it, and the feedback will mess up the pitch. That's the biggest thing, where it just kind of and it does it in certain ways depending on which oscillators you have turned on and which ones are not, or what the filter cutoff frequency is. It'll do it in a notch sort of a way. It'll do it in a continuous sort of a way.
Mm-hmm.
But another way to get really nasty sounds is that, analog synthesizers can do FM. They don't do it well like a digital synthesizer does, but the fact that it doesn't do it well gives it a great, awesome sound. And if you're going through this Minimoog plugin, there's a preset called Metallo in the I believe it's in the aggressive folder, where the FM effect really makes the thing growl.
Mm-hmm. Well, in so in FM, you're using what, oscillator 3, and keeping it up in the pitch range, but then using it as a modulation source. Is that how you basically put those sorts of patches together?
That's right. So where you would normally use it like an LFO, you pull your mod wheel up, or we actually have that extra control, the modulation amount, which works in interaction with the mod wheel.
Mm-hmm.
You pull that up, and then you take your third oscillator from low range, which is LFO, up into the audio range, and you've got FM. The thing to remember is that your third oscillator still has to be lower than the first oscillator. You'll still get great FM effects, but it's just the nature of analog oscillators. They don't handle like a DX7 having the modulator at a higher frequency than the carrier.
Ooh, that's cool.
That sounds awesome.
That's so rad. Do you use that feature much on your sounds, Josh?
Not much. And strangely, like I've been first thing I noticed is like, wow, look at all these presets. So I've just been sitting here all night long, kind of discovering all of these sounds that are kind of bucketed down into effects categories, lead categories. So it's been really fun, doing like just my own personal side by side to one another. And again, like the sound through headphones and my monitors, it's really, really close.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I had a good question kind of asking from like a recording point of view, so we talked about like delay and adding some effects to the Moog. What about like in terms of like EQ or compression, and like how do you get the Moog, specifically the Minimoog, how do you get to sit with other elements of the mix like the drums and other parts?
Well, I think it. Well, first of all, that's why it took us. We started playing live shows in late 2008. We didn't put an album out until 2014, and that's partially because we went through 4 different mixes of the album.
Yep, that'll take it some time.
And no one really had the vision that we had. Again, like I was saying earlier, it's like back in 2008 or whatever it was, 2009, 2010. That's when dubstep was huge, and like these production technique that we weren't necessarily fond of.
Yep.
That's kind of what everyone thought we wanted to do, because we were an electronic music band. Like this is what's popular. Let's do that. That's not really what we wanted at all. So
yeah,
a lot of the mixes would come back with super sidechain compression, and like everything was just wrong. No, we wanted it to sound like if you gave Black Sabbath synthesizers, this is what the album would sound like. That's what we want. So
yeah, so mess it up, make it dirty, make it rock.
Yeah, we had a really hard time mixing analog drums to fit with direct synthesizers, mainly because again we're working from a budget. We wanted early on just to do everything ourselves, to be able to own everything and have full creative control. So with that comes disadvantages like not having a producer, and the learning curve is really thick, especially coming into a land that none of us are overly familiar with as far as recording synthesizers. And the majority of the stuff we recorded like in our studio or in the bedroom, and then we'd take that to like a studio where we would record, like an actual legit studio to record live drums, because we weren't even going there. So that way we'd at least have the good drum sounds, and then finding the mix to make them blend was a real challenge. And it took four or 5 different people to try and mix that correctly. And we ended up using a dude, his name was Florian Amen. He worked on all of the Rammstein albums, and I think it was Mariah Carey. So,
so he knows both sides of the coin. He knows.
Exactly. He was able to nail it for us on that first album, and that one, again, like we weren't throwing a lot of dynamic range as far as the synths go, because it was like our Metallica Kill 'Em All. Like we want balls to the wall, gnarly chainsaw sounding synthesizers and live drums, and like a really aggressive sound, and it was the use of like a lot of delays, and I think you know, it was a lot of stuff that was post-production that that we kind of didn't really know going into, like, how do we make this sit well with a live instrument, and that would come in with like plugins with compressions and delays and reverbs and stuff like that.
Yeah, nice. Well, Patrick, any other like big tips and tricks to using the Minimoog Luna instrument, or just Minimoog in general? Any tips that you haven't really seen us hit this week, or that you think people should know about with the plugin version specifically?
Oh man, you know, you guys have covered so many of the Minimoog tips and tricks. You know, if you look in the effects section, that, you know, I love the fact that the way that it does the audio rate modulation on the filter. That was one of those things that analog synths do well, digital doesn't normally do well, and I was so glad when we nailed it. You know, in the effects section, there's like Sparky and a couple of other sounds that you can only do if you've got really, really good filter FM. You know,
Sparky.
I really like. I had to be really coaxed into putting velocity in there because I really wanted it to be as true as possible. I was really worried about features that would make it sound less like a Minimoog. And what I found was that once velocity was in there, after my arm was twisted, I thanked the person who twisted my arm, and because then you start getting textures that reminded me of really early Moog modular stuff, like when Wendy Carlos insisted that Bob Moog invent a velocity-sensitive keyboard for switched on Bach. It really harkened me back to those old sounds. So, you know, as much as velocity was really never in the vintage Minimoogs, it still sounds classic, and it still sounds vintage. It doesn't sound like, well, we just slathered a feature in there.
Yeah, totally. And those are, having those velocity controls, you know, for cutoff, contour, and loudness. It kind of adds another layer of expressiveness that you can put into it. You wouldn't be able to get with the classic one, but now with this, it gives you some more options.
Yeah, and what, you know, I think, you know, when you think of tips and tricks, I mean, one of the things that I really, really like is when you're using no tips and tricks. When you just take that first thing when you first load it up, which is two oscillators, an octave apart, nothing going on with the filter, because they just kind of roar. And that's a testament to, you know, what UA has always been good at with things like the Neve and stuff like that, is taking the whole signal path and looking at how everything reacts with everything, and making something that that is as close to indistinguishable from the real thing as possible. I mean, I was making reference recordings between the Golden unit and this, and once I got it super dialed in, because all the controls are squirrely. They even though we actually commissioned a knob turning robot to get the every single knob reacting exactly the way it should. 4 months later, when we were doing the listening test, they had still drifted away from where they were. But once I got the sounds dialed into where they were the identical voltages, then I couldn't hear the difference between the Golden unit and this. The people who were in the plugins team, who have made all those wonderful plugins, couldn't tell the difference. I had people with much, you know, I have very, very trained ears, but I have old ears. So I had people with young ears that can hear the higher frequencies. Nobody could tell the difference. People went halfway through the blind test and just said, just stop.
It's like I can't pick them out. It was so, and it was fun. Yeah, getting to hear it when you first showed it to me, like hearing it side by side, and you're just like, it's the character, the soul, the depth of that sound comes through on both of them. You were going one to the other. You're like, no matter how extreme of a filter setting or anything, it was like hearing a carbon copy delay, you know?
Yeah.
Nice. Well, yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to mention something about that feedback effect, because a lot of people, and throughout the week I've been hearing a lot of people talking about it, and how just it is one of those sometimes useful, sometimes not, but super fun things. People use it live as a pitch bend effect too. But when we started working on this, the engineer really told me up front, we're going to be able to do Model X, Model Y, and Model Z, but I'm really worried about this feedback thing. I think it's probably going to double the development time. And we got through modeling everything else. He got through modeling everything else. I just, acted like I just backseat drove the whole thing. And when he finished all of the components, and when he finished modeling all the components, and he said, "Okay, here we are. We're getting to this big thing." He made the connection, and it worked the first time. Not only did it work the first time, but it worked so well that we didn't need to make a single change. That's how good the model was.
Wow. That's crazy. So yeah, it didn't need extra. It wasn't like one of those things like, oh, we're about halfway there, we need to tweak and keep going. It was like instantly we have the sound.
I had a moment of thinking, no, this isn't it, until I compared it against the Golden unit, and I'm like, no, this is exactly it. I just have the filter set differently or something like that.
Yeah.
There wasn't even any, okay, we need to change the gain structures. There wasn't, oh, can we put an EQ on it? Can we change the frequency response? Everything was just exactly right. No changes at all.
Wow. That's amazing, man. It's a testament to the level of detail and the coding and the algorithms and just the craftsmanship that kind of goes into modeling every single detail, every resistor, every component of these circuits, and making sure that gets accurately represented in all, both in the Luna instruments, but also in all the UAD emulations as well.
Absolutely. I mean, modeling a circuit is one thing, but then modeling it and then going over it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that you've modeled that circuit, and that you think. A lot of people can talk about circuit modeling, but modeling a circuit is one thing. Diving deep into each component and really understanding what it does in a vacuum, what it does when it's reacting with all the other things, is a different thing altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, guys, it's been super fun. Josh, dude, this is so cool to see some of your process here, and I don't know if you're down, man. I think the people would love another just little jam like what you had cooked up there. It was so much fun. So I don't. Yeah. Oh, good. You started yourself a preset. Look at you.
Oh,
You're on top of it. Well, and Patrick, man, dude, thank you. Thanks for Zoom bombing us as well, man. It was really cool to kind of hear some of the behind the scenes there and get the tips straight from the horse's mouth. So yeah, dude, excellent work on this plugin. We're super excited to have it out there, and it's been a really fun week, kind of nerding out and kind of diving deep into this one plugin. And you guys just knocked it out of the park. Just totally killed it on this, dude. It's such a good plugin.
Thank you. Yeah, and I encourage anybody who hasn't, who has Luna and hasn't given it a try. Definitely, it's worth trying. Like I say, two in the making, so much detail in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and a good way to try that out, hopefully you guys got the email yesterday. We have a new Luna session available inside the app. So the trailer for the Moog video the music for it was composed by Atticus Ross, and we have the full session with the Moog settings that he used, as well as the final mix stems, available for download inside of Luna. So if you go to the create page, right at the top right, you'll see the link for it. If you download that, you can not only hear the final results, but also hear the patches and get in there and play with the Minimoog. You can get hands-on and see how he came up, because he did some really interesting stuff. I don't know if you've had a chance to check it out, Patrick, but he's got this cool noise rhythm track that blew my mind, and also the way the lead melody, he's using the octave switcher basically to create a stepped octave, cool little melody thing. So yeah, if you guys haven't, if you're watching, if you haven't downloaded that session yet, I highly, highly recommend that you do. Open it up. There's a lot to explore, both on the Minimoog and on the audio side. And yeah, definitely give that a shout. And yeah, so Josh, I see you pulled up your preset. I'll let you kind of play us out, but I guess before we go, what if people want to learn more about Fartbarf or kind of be following you guys around the internet, what's the best way to stalk you?
Well, there's only one fartbarf.com, so there's only 3 people on the face of the planet who want to be known by them, and I'm one of them. So if you Google Fartbarf, you'll find us.
Awesome. So Google Fartbarf, pretty easy to find, hard to forget, and it's man. Right? Well, yeah, dude, this has been super cool nerding out with you. But yeah, let's hear some music and just feel free to jam out and have some fun.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Let's see here. This beat going on again. night.
I know, dude. We could sit here all day too. That was rad, dude. It's really cool to see how like quickly. I noticed you mapped a few of the parameters onto your keyboard, and it just adds this performance element, this dynamic kind of tweak it. It's so cool, man. Like such an inspiration to see how you can get hands on with it and just have fun so immediately.
Yeah, for sure. No,
Yeah.
it's always cool to be able to map your own like. That's cool.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, Josh, man, this has been so much fun hanging out with you. Thanks for joining the show here on a Friday afternoon. We appreciate having you by and dropping some knowledge and some inspiration for people with the Minimoog. And thank you everybody for tuning in, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this week. We're actually going to take next week off. Maybe even 2 weeks off. We're going to have a little break. I'm going to take some naps. And then Office Hours is going to return here in a few weeks. And we'll be back locked and loaded with even more awesome content for you guys. So this is a perfect time to go back, rewatch some of the old episodes if you missed any. And just keep on having fun inside of Luna. Keep on exploring. And I'll see you guys back here in a little bit. All right. See you, everybody.
Man, good to meet you, Patrick.